Hey everyone, welcome to The Creek. My name is Jerrard Miller and I'm the ministry lead here, and I'm joined by a member of the Creek team, Carolyn Jerrard, who's going to be sharing some wisdom today with us around the subject of art, beauty, and spiritual discipline. And so Carolyn, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
You're welcome.
So first of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about this book, the Way of the Artist, or the Artist Way, and kind of walk us through what, I mean, you're not at the end of it yet, but how did you find this book, and what's kind of the idea behind the book?
Okay, so I brought the book so I could kind of show it.
Perfect.
You could see it. So this is a book called The Artist's Way, and it's the subtitle is A Spiritual Path to Higher Creativity, and it's by an author named Julia Cameron. And the way I came about it was that a friend of mine in Calgary here, who is a playwright, was doing this course. I don't really want it is, she does say course on it, was doing this course, and she kept mentioning it, but she didn't really tell me what it was really about. And I kept thinking it was for writers, that it was to help writers kind of access their true thoughts and their deep emotions and the creativity that they've been suppressing in other ways. And then after a while, she just kept bringing it up, and it just sounded really interesting. And I asked her more about it, and sure enough, it's for any artist. In fact, it's not really just for artists, it's for anybody. And so Julia Cameron is a Christian, and she does write it from a Christian's perspective. Although, even if you're not of the Christian faith, you could definitely find this book approachable. It's not so heavy in the Christian faith that it's not, strictly for that. So the idea behind it is finding the creative self in you that you have hidden through being self-conscious, through criticism from other people, through lack of energy, or through stereotypes that you think that you either fit into or don't fit into. So one of her best examples is the way that Julia Cameron came upon developing this course, was that she herself was the starving artist living in Greenwich Village in New York. She was an alcoholic, she was promiscuous, she was, living in not a great situation, but she had come to believe in herself that she needed to be all those things in order to be her best creative self. And so she was creating art while drunk. And one day she decided, I don't really want to do this anymore, but I'm afraid if I'm not drinking, I won't be creative. And so she locked herself away in a cabin. It's somewhere in the southern states. And she started writing. Every morning she would get up in the morning and write 3 pages of just streaming consciousness, just whatever thoughts came into her head, no matter how ridiculous. And so she started doing this, and instead of drinking, she would do this practice every morning. And then slowly she developed this way of finding her inner artist child that had been covered up with all the other things in life. And then a few years later, she started to actually kind of teach this idea at college, and a friend of hers said, you need to put this down in writing, and you need to make it a full-on course. And so with the help of her friend, she did, and she's been teaching it ever since. So that's kind of the gist of it. There's 3 components to it. There's morning pages, which you wake up every morning for 12 weeks, half an hour before everybody else in your house wakes up, and you write 3 pages. And you can literally just be writing, I don't know what to write, I don't know what to write, I don't know what to write, for 3 pages. Just do it. And then the second component is an artist's date. So that's where you're taking your artist self, and she calls it an artist, your inner child artist, out for a date. And that sounds so cheesy, and I've already been made fun of it for it, but it's fulfilling that part of yourself that's like, oh, I'd like to do this, but then you never do it. I'd like to go do some watercolor and you never buy watercolors, or I really want to go just walk around those botanical gardens, but I never do it. I want to go to a movie alone, but you never make the time. So it's those kind of things. And once a week, you're supposed to set aside time to do that. And then the third component is at the end of each chapter, there's tasks, and they're all writing tasks. That was a huge hurdle for me because I hate writing. But you don't have to do all of them, but she encourages you to do the ones that you resist the most. And so there are these tasks that kind of create spontaneity in you to respond quickly, to respond without letting your inner critic jump in too quickly. So they're these kind of vulnerable tasks, but you don't really share them with anybody. They're just for you. And so those are the three components of the Artist's Way.
Very cool. I love that idea of, doing something, especially the things you don't want to do, because I mean, so much of contemporary life is really just doing the things that you like to do, talking to the people you like to talk with, going to the restaurants that you like to go to. We have this phenomenal amount of choice, and I love the sort of the contrast of that, those kind of the two worlds that she inhabited. It reminded me of I had to look up the quote because I wanted to get it right. There's a quote by Soren Kierkegaard, who said, "What is a poet but an unhappy man who hides deep anguish in his heart, and whose lips are so well formed that when the sigh and the cry pass through them, they sound like lovely music, and people flock around the poet and say, 'Sing again soon.' That is, that they say, 'May many new sufferings torment your soul, but your lips be fashioned before us, for the cry would only frighten us, but the music is blissful.'" This idea of moving from a situation where she thought that she had to suffer to create, to realizing that the kind of suffering that she was going to do was actually going to be suffering that was productive. And this idea that there's a difference between suffering for suffering's sake and suffering for kind of a higher cause rather. And this sort of idea that seems really intrinsic to the whole process is this sort of sense of discipline. And so, like, for you, I mean, I know a bit of your story, and you don't have to go into too much of it here, but your experience with church has fundamentally changed, or at least fairly radically changed, from the church you grew up in, and through a variety of different avenues and doors to kind of this point in time. How has your experience of discipline changed in the church, and how has this book kind of shaped and molded and approached and or is changing your approach to discipline?
Well, I think I was reflecting on this the other day, and very much so my idea of spiritual discipline growing up, the church I went to, there were basically two ways. You read your Bible as much as you possibly could and possibly memorize it if you could, and you went to church on Sundays. And that was kind of it. Those were your, that's how you developed your faith. And I think that's a very narrow-minded approach. And over the years, I have, changed my viewpoint on how I can connect with God. And I was already on the path to figuring this out. And, as my artistic practice developed over the last 8 years, I have very much found a connection with my art to my faith. But this book here is helping me realize that there are no hard and fast rules about how you have to connect with God. There's so many ideas out there, and we often just are told certain things in our youth, and that's what we do, and we're missing out on opening up our minds and opening up our hearts to letting God talk to you. If you want. Maybe some people don't like that kind of terminology, but like she actually advises in this book that if you are someone of the Christian faith, to use your morning pages as a way to talk to God, and to talk to God about the dumbest things, the things that are so menial, the things that are so silly, like frustration with that one plant in your house that you can't seem to keep alive, or anger about how hot it is and you can't cool down, or like frustrations with your neighbor. Like it's about all those things that we don't think that are worthy of God's time, but it 100% is worthy of God's time, because God created you and knows all those frustrations and all those angers and all those little things that you keep buried down, but you just want to get out so deeply. So I think, and that's not the only way, obviously. Like, I don't just sit there and vent every morning to God, but it's kind of just like the idea of bearing your soul, and not holding anything back. And I mean, it's also part of the way that she's trying to get you to understand your creative self inside. I mean, when you let go of those little daily things that are kind of bogging you down, you're going to be able to experience the rest of your day with a different attitude and a different perspective. And same, like, when it comes to, like, and I do still read my Bible, and when I do, and my mind is not filled with all the thoughts that were going around in the morning, I'm prepared and I'm ready and I'm open and I'm able to receive better what I'm reading. So I don't know if that actually answers your question.
Oh, absolutely, 1,000%. Like this, I love you kind of teased it out. This idea that God has kind of God has made a bunch of different paths for people to walk down and experience God, and that's kind of this beautiful piece of it, is that it is, and I love so much that it's coming from sort of an artistic bent, because there's the more kind of like what you do with your art, and there's layers to it, there's texture, and that it's not simply just like, it's not flat paint on a blank canvas. It's not you don't paint watercolors, and like, as for me, as someone sort of without an artistic bone in my body, this idea of creating something that's multi-layered and there's a complexity that comes with that. And so in thinking about the complexity of art and the complexity that art brings into our world, it reminds me that the church has had a long history of art and beauty, and kind of shaping the way that people experience God with their whole being, rather than just with their head. And so for you, in engaging with this material and trying to think about this for someone like me who's completely non-artistic, what would the book kind of offer me as a first step? So as someone who's not an artist, but as someone who wants to find deeper disciplines, who wants to build sort of a capacity for finding structured life with God.
Yeah.
How is this book kind of, your husband is an incredibly disciplined person, but I don't picture James as terribly artistic. So like,
yeah, I think, the first thing is there needs to be a qualifier with the words artistic and creative. Like, one of the first things she argues in this book is there's no such thing as a non-creative person. If you believe that we were created in the image of God, who is a creator, you are creative. You were made to be creative, and everybody has that ability in themselves to be creative. And that's why I think, like, this book is not just for artists. I think when you say the word artistic, maybe that's more referencing a person who creates art with the purpose of presenting it to the world, as an artist with that label artist. But I think when people say they don't have an artistic bone in their body, I was like, no, everybody does. Everybody does. It just means that maybe it's not as identifiable as mine is. Mine's very obvious that I make acrylic paintings and they're out there for the world to see. Creativity comes in all kinds of fashion, right? Like creativity is how you meet people. Creativity is how you set up the layout of your house. Like creativity is what you plant in your garden. Like it's all how you interact with children. It comes in all kinds of different ways. And I think we've put it into this narrow labeling of, if you're creative, therefore you're an artist, and if you're not producing art, then you're not creative, and that's not true at all. So I think this book is it's not just about finding the artists within that you've maybe trapped deep down over years of neglect and stuff like that. I think it's more about finding life is interrupting me here for a second. Finding the ways that you actually want to approach your life. Like, she gives so many examples. She gives this example of a young millionaire who was so wealthy that for his 21st birthday, his dad bought him a seat at the New York Stock Exchange. That was his birthday gift. And he loved art. And the only way he thought he could access art was by purchasing art. And so he had a massive collection in his home of art. And he even, for 1 year, he paid the salary of an artist that he knew to create art. And that was his way of, he thought that was fulfilling him by investing so much of his money, because that's what he thought his value was having this money to invest in art. And he ended up doing the artist's way and discovering that he actually wanted to create art himself. He just didn't know how to allow himself that possibility. He thought, I'm made to do business. I am made to understand numbers and finance. And by doing this, he realized that maybe he's not a painter, but maybe he's a writer. Maybe he's a poet. Maybe he brings art, creativeness to his business. Maybe he brings creativity in his home life in some way. But it was a great example to me of that. Anybody can use this to kind of figure out how they want their life to kind of be more fulfilling in those ways that we don't necessarily think we can be fulfilled.
It kind of invites us to almost redefine what that beauty is. So we think about beauty in really clear terms. Like, it's one of those things that we all recognize, but we all recognize is sort of subjective at the end of the day. Like,
yeah.
Like we picture, we all know something can be beautiful, but we all know that it's that beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And so right. We get to the same, we should be taking the same kind of license and saying, I can make something beautiful in my life with what I do with the tools and the equipment that I have around me.
Yeah.
And so thinking about that idea of beauty and kind of, looking at what kind of, do you see a place, a greater role in the church's life to incorporate beauty and incorporate art? Like, we look at church, I think, very broadly as a community that, like, we get together and we sing, there's stained glass, architecture is part of it. Yeah. And we kind of frame it in very narrow terms, and in terms, at least thinking about the beauty of a gathered church experience.
Yeah.
In thinking about the church in kind of the capacity that we're exploring here at the Creek, what ways do you think that we could more fully, I think, emphasize beauty in this space? like what role, I guess, I'm pushing you off the questions that I sent you before. But like, what role do you think beauty plays in the kind of mission of the church?
Oh man. Well, I think it kind of just goes back to what I said about my experience. It's like, I think involving more creative, artistic ways in worship and in community will allow people to see that our faith and our God is much more attainable and accessible than we realize. That, you know, the Christian experience can be much more than sitting in a pew on Sunday morning. You know, it can be like my husband's church. As you know, like he's Orthodox, and when you go to that church, it is a full-on sensory experience.
Yep.
There are scents, there are sounds, there's art everywhere, and you participate with your body. You're moving quite a lot in the service, and even that, you know, something as traditional as that, but it is so involved in the senses and in the art that I think it really opens you up to like what you can experience rather than just the sitting and the watching. So I think by inviting creativity and artistic practices into the Creek, I think we're gonna allow people to experience God in their own way, not in the way that we're telling them to experience God. At least I hope that's what happened. And then not making people feel like they're not getting it, or they're missing something, or they're not following the rules, or they're not weird because they want to try something different, or they want to think about something different, or they want to ask questions. So I think, you know, it's not that we throw out our theology altogether or our doctrine altogether. It's just that we allow people to approach it in different ways, to experience it in different ways.
Yeah, I think that's such a perfect summation of what beauty can do.
Yeah.
Is, you know, it creates this thing. It creates space, and I think that's a really kind of a neat that's a really neat kind of practice to think about and sort of focus on. So, like, for you, as you know, one of the things that you do really well, one of the things that I really respect about you is that you have this amazing capacity for engaging in your neighborhood, and you know your neighbors. Your community has a really cool community kind of spirit to it. Have you thought about how art will kind of carry forward in that? Like, I mean, beyond the fact that people, you know, probably know that you're an artist, have you thought about how beauty and how art and how kind of the developing of an artist's way, even the development of kind of disciplines and patterns and liturgies and habits, have you thought about how those will kind of play into your relationships as a neighborhood?
Yeah, I think, you know, like I was saying, the tasks that she gets you to do, she says, choose the ones that you're resisting the most. Because oftentimes the things that we're resisting the most are the things that we know we need to do, we just don't want to. You know, and they're usually the things that are going to change us the most and maybe challenge us in good ways. So some of the, like you said, I've only been doing this for 4 weeks, but I've already noticed that I'm acknowledging those things that I've been resisting to do. So, you know, I think like in terms of my community, there are maybe neighbors that I haven't reached out to because I'm avoiding them because they're older and I don't know how to connect with them, and I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do, so I just stick to the ones that I know and it's convenient and easy and I'm comfortable with them. But there's like probably, like I live on a cul-de-sac, and there's at least half of them that I don't even know. I've never even seen a couple of them, except as they drive by. So, and I keep thinking, well, you're the one who's lived here longer than me. You should reach out to me. I'm the new one on the block. And that's just, I just don't think that's it. I don't think that's right. And so, and then I kept thinking, oh, well, for instance, we did a mini golf tournament in our cul-de-sac.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was
And I kept thinking, well, they'll come out to that, so I'll meet them there. And they didn't. And so I know I'm hearing that little voice in the back of my head saying, like, you know, this is, you're not finding any opportunity here, so you better create the opportunity. So things like that. I think this course allows you to kind of, you're all in once. You're setting yourself aside and also putting yourself first, all at once, because you're trying to discover what it is that is hidden deep down, what you really want to do, what you're really good at, what you really are passionate about. And at the same time, you're putting yourself out there and putting yourself in the uncomfortable position of trying things that you've been resisting for so long. So, yeah, things like that. Like, for instance, I don't like talking on the phone. I hate talking on the phone. But I have people in my life who love talking on the phone. And I was like, the other day I said, no, you just need to do it. You just need to suck it up. You need to call this person because you know that they're lonely. You know that they're not very happy in life right now. And they love talking on the phone, and it would fulfill them. So get over yourself, pick up the phone and call them. And I did. And of course it was great. And the person appreciated it. But I think, when we hear those opportunities in the back of our brain, we really have to do our best to get over those and recognize that it's not all about us. You know, it's about us. That's not really answering the community question at all. I think there's something so much bigger to be gained by knowing the people around you, and you can do that in so many different ways. Like, it can be so simple. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have these people over to your house. You know, it doesn't have to be something huge. It could be just going and, when the snow comes, you shovel their driveway. It can be small things that build, Yeah.
So I want to circle back to this, something that you just said. It's been sticking with me because I think it's such an important part of it. That, as you said something along the lines of, pushing yourself to be more comfortable being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that seems to be a big thrust in the book.
Yes.
And it's one of these things that at least in Calgary right now, I think it broadly you could say that our culture tries to avoid discomfort.
Yes.
And so in a lot of ways, I mean, being an artist is kind of a natural spot where you have to sort of, distance yourself from that sort of cultural narrative that if the only thing that we ever do is make ourselves comfortable, then are we really going to make great art?
Right.
And, we talked about the sort of the kind of suffering that you do, but this idea of pushing yourself sort of outside of whatever might be normal in our neighborhood or in our kind of in our city, and trying to find opportunities. What would you say is the most beautiful thing that you have experienced as an artist? And that question might not make sense, but like, one of the cool things that you get to do as an artist is you get to have this kind of, you get to make an impact in people's lives. You get to, you put paint on, or you put paint on a canvas. Again, this is a gross oversimplification of what you do. You put paint on a canvas, and you put it up on your website, and somebody comes along and says, I love that, I need to have that in my life right now.
Right.
I need this piece of Carolyn in my living room for the rest of 60 years or however long the person lasts for. And so you get to have this kind of impact as an artist in people's lives that might maybe seem small, but kind of shapes them. One of the sort of the key tenets that I try to observe and try to build into ministry here at the Creek is that we're not brains on sticks, that we're led by our heart and our desires and our kind of impulses as much as anything else. And so you get to speak into people's lives on a daily basis. And so for you, what would you say is the most kind of beautiful thing that you've gotten to experience in having that relationship with people?
Oh gosh. I think, well, okay, for one thing, doing commission pieces for people is one of the best. That's why I started this. I even named my business about doing custom pieces for people, because I think that we have forgotten, our society has forgotten how deep the message of art can be and how it can really grab your soul. I remember seeing this painting by this famous artist, and I had seen his work on Netflix in a documentary, and I got to see one in person last September, and I had to keep it together because it was so incredibly beautiful, and I never imagined seeing it in person. And then to have a piece made for you that's my interpretation of what they think beauty is. It's a very interesting relationship, and it's very intimate actually, because you're trying to find out what moves this person's heart when they look at art, what causes them to quote you, Jerrard, like you said one time, this painting makes me feel things and I don't know why. And that was the best quote, because that really is summing it up. We don't need to have a reason. And I love that about beauty. And we don't need to have a reason to why we think something is beautiful. You're free to just say it is beautiful, end of story. And to create a piece that someone looks at and they can't even put into words why they feel the way they do about it, that's really special. And you're right, it's a piece of me living in somebody's home. It definitely is. I have met artists who create art so fast and plop it out and sell it like hotcakes. And oftentimes it's basically the same painting over and over and over again. And they don't feel anything when they sell it except, yay, I made some money. And I cannot relate to that. And I think that's a slippery slope, because I think creating art, true art, is bearing your soul on the canvas. And when you let it go into someone else's hands, you're going to feel a teensy bit of sadness. And maybe that's just me. I'm sure there's many artists who would disagree with me. When you're making thousands of dollars, maybe it doesn't hurt so much. I don't know, but I think that, and this is totally going off topic here, but I just think that to create real, genuine art from your deep creative self, you're going to be putting yourself on that canvas, and it is going to be hard to give it away and hard to let it go, because you're never going to get it back. And also it's going into people's homes and it's on display for everybody else to see now, and you're not there to defend it and you're not there to be a part of it. So anyway, I don't know where we were going with that, but I when you think about community too, I think that little things matter, and the way you feed into your community and with your creative self, people don't underestimate what you can do. Don't underestimate what your actions do, what your smile does, what that small little gesture does for someone else. We can't underestimate that. In a world that is all about me, and you do you and all that garbage, those little things are what we're gonna cause. That's our survival, right? We need those things. Yeah.
That's amazing. What a note to end on. That was so good.
My tangent.
Oh my gosh, bring it on. More. That was so good. Thank you so much, Carol. I mean, this was incredible. Thank you for taking the time to share. I mean, even the act that of chatting with me today. I know you've got a daughter that you're trying to take care of, your husband. Malcolm was on video here briefly. So it's you really embody this idea of living yourself, putting yourself on the page. And so thank you very much for taking some time to talk with me this afternoon, and I mean, just dropping some amazing wisdom for us.
Well, I'm not sure if it's wisdom, but I'm happy to talk about this stuff. It's yeah, I don't have many other people to talk to about it, so thank you.
Literally anytime.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, yeah. I mean, for now, I mean, everybody that's watching, thank you so much for watching and for being part of the conversations here at the Creek. We're gonna keep putting content out 3 days a week. So hope that you've liked, subscribe, and check out Carolyn's website, cjcustomt.com.ca.com. Perfect. Yeah, I got it right first time. And anyway, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Thanks for being with us. See you soon. Bye.